As the U.S. increases its bombing capabilities in the Middle East, does the meeting at the White House on Monday between President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu signify that a strike on Iran is all but imminent? Well, TBN Israel's Mati Shoshani is here to fill us in. So, Mati, Trump has made a lot of threats about bombing Iran. What do you think is going to happen?
I hesitate to say these kind of things on camera. We're living in such a crazy time. I mean, we have to smile and laugh for a second at everything that's been happening. Let me say this. Regardless of how this ends, and I'll get to that in a second, I commend and I almost envy the American people for having a president that speaks so boldly and also acts in the same sort of line as what he's saying. Never before has anyone put so much pressure on the Iranian people, both militarily and also as far as it goes to sanctions and diplomatic pressure. So that alone has been a game changer in sort of the power struggle and power games in the Middle East. What's going to happen? I'm not going to go through the entire analysis of this. I'll just say it simply. We're at a place today where it is the best day ever to negotiate. The Iranians have made their point. They've shown what they're able to do in the Middle East, for better and for worse. They've lost a lot of power. They've lost a lot of assets, but they've also proven to be a worthy adversary in many, many areas. The U.S. has proven that it's a man or woman of its word and brought its forces to bear on the shores of Iran. And it's done so in a very, very public way, in a very clear way. And you combine those two, that's the only way you can have an agreement. And I think that's the most likely scenario, by the way, is we're going to have an agreement where Iran saves face but still backs down from their nuclear plan. By the way, there's a lot of statements, including a U.S. intelligence report that says they already backed down from their nuclear military plan more than 6 months ago. They just haven't told anyone about it. But have you heard about that?
I have not, no.
It was released in July, I think, by someone in the U.S. government. Anyway, we never know with the Iranians, so I'm going to just set that as a side note. So I think that's likely. I think we're going to see an agreement between the U.S., between Iran, in which the Iranians back down from military nuclear aspirations. The sanctions are removed to a certain degree, and they get a place at the table when it comes to rebuilding the Middle East. There is an unlikely scenario, and the unlikely scenario is that a mistake is made. And let's go back, let's say, to the Cuban Missile Crisis. All it takes is one smart person to prevent World War III, and all it takes is one idiot to create World War III. And that could be someone in an Iranian Coast Guard, radar station that sees a flock of birds flying by and says, look, the F-22s or the F-35s are coming, press all the red buttons. It could be someone in Yemen, in Houthi-controlled northern Yemen, that says the same thing. It could be someone in Israeli Central Command that says exactly those same words, that says, look, something is about to happen, and all the radars go off and all the alarms go off, and we go to war unintentionally. And that is a real possibility.
Wow. Okay. So what do you think, obviously there's more than just Iran happening at the White House right now. They're talking about tariffs, all sorts of things, but specifically with Iran and with the geopolitical war games happening in the Middle East, what do you think Netanyahu hopes to accomplish with this meeting with Trump?
So Netanyahu has been, he has been the man calling, wolf for decades now about the Iranians. One thing there's more than one thing, but this one thing can also be sort of put on a positive record for him. He's been clear, he's been internationally vocal about Iran not being able or not being able to have a nuclear capability. And he's been very, very, very clear about trying to prevent it. And we've taken action to prevent it, as of the Americans and many other countries. And his concern, and we've been very public about this, is that the Iranians weasel their way out of true sanctions and true supervision of their nuclear capabilities as they are today. They're considered to be a threshold nuclear country. So they're months away from enrichment at a level of weapon-grade uranium, and they're possibly months or a little more than that away from having a warhead. And our concern is that interest fizzles out in Iran, that an agreement is reached, but it doesn't really cover all the bases. And we find ourselves in the same position in 6, 12, 18 months, which is terrible. Because Iran shouldn't be given the chance to rearm itself and rearrange its proxies in the area.
So, Mati, correct me if I'm wrong. You're half Persian, right?
Yeah, but going several generations back.
Yeah. Okay. So you have an interesting perspective about this. when people talk about Iran, and it's almost like this duality where people will discuss the Iranian nuclear facilities and program as completely logistical, completely just a deterrent, wanting to be, a part of the global community that has this big bad weapon, versus other people when you talk about it, it's like, no, they are an apocalyptic Islamic fundamentalist regime that doesn't care what happens to them. They're concerned about the afterlife. They're concerned about martyrdom. What do you think is the truth? Do you think that there is a aspect of this where Iran just is actually wanting to start chaos, or do you think it's more like you said earlier, where it's like a completely pragmatic solution?
Yes, I mean yes to both of those questions. Yes, they're absolutely insane, and at the same time they're absolutely pragmatic and reasonable in the way they're going about the world. They're just doing it in a way that doesn't make sense to us because they're not Western in their thought, and they're not Judeo-Christian in their thought process. They're jihadist Islamic in their mindset, and they think in the context of end times, just not the Book of Revelations or Ezekiel end times, the Quran and specific sects within Shia Islam end times. And they talk about their agenda on that topic. Look, if anything, you need to hand it to them. They're honest and truthful in their communication on a regular basis. They've told us what they intend to do. They've said it for decades, and they've done exactly that. We want to kill you, everything you believe in, everything you stand for, and we're going to stop at nothing until Islam takes over the world and we bring in the Mahdi, we bring in the Muslim Messiah. They're very clear about that. And at the same time, they are a tyrannical government that wants to remain in power of the Iranian people. Look, let's be clear here. The Iranian people are hostages of the Iranian Islamic government. They're not willing accomplices in this game. And they're held by a death choke of the Iranian government. The IRGC spends a lot of its time, money, and effort in suppressing any kind of resentment or pushback by the Iranian public against the government. And they use a huge amount of violence and money to do exactly that. So they don't want to be thrown out of the government. They don't want to lose everything. And at the same time, their reasoning and the way they go about things is not Western. As in Western mindset would say, we go about life because the goal, the purpose of life, I apologize on behalf of my neighbor's dogs. They go about life. They go about life, or so I should say in the West, we go about life saying we want quality of life, we want stability, we want prosperity, we want GDP and growth. That's not what they're thinking. They want to go back to the Persian Empire. They want to bring an Islamic empire that involves regional control and regional power. And you use the word destabilize. They are the most destabilizing force that this earth has seen since World War II, in my opinion. They've been incredibly effective. If you think about bang per buck, pun intended, by the way, if you think about bang per buck of their efficacy in using their money and their influence to destabilize the region, think about this. A year ago, they jacked up global dry goods by 30% in a month, just by sort of putting a bit of a chokehold on the Bab el-Mandeb Straits, so going through Houthi-controlled Yemen towards the Suez Canal. They almost toppled the Egyptian government's income from the Suez Canal just by doing that. They're very clever, they're very shrewd, they're very violent, and they're very malicious in the way they do things, but they're not stupid. And they're not just religious zealots, they're also people with logic and a very, very, very thought out plan.
Mati, you are a wealth of information, my brother. I've known you for many years now, and for someone who might not have ever met Mati, Mati is the real deal. I think that God has definitely placed you in this position at TBN Israel to be a voice for truth, for knowledge, for wisdom. Mati, my friend, toda rabba. God bless you.
Thank you, Raj.